I think a lot of that had to do with just having imposter syndrome. I struggled with that so much. That really drained me all the time. I mean,
Mm.
I just was overwhelmed all the time. I was like, I just don't know if I can do this. Like, I'm starting to get emotional right now.
Welcome to the Vet Life Reimagined podcast. While the name Dr. Sprinkle is pretty cool, the name Genesis Jones is powerful, and she lives up to her name. Genesis is a little over 1 year out of veterinary school, so she brings a beautiful perspective for us all. I thought we would spend time talking about her role in the Latinx Veterinary Medical Association, and we do, but she really lit up when we started talking about imposter syndrome, and she reflects over her growth and the people who helped her along the way, from her father to veterinarians in her support system. Here is Genesis Jones. How did you know that you wanted to go into veterinary medicine?
Yeah, I was one of those kids growing up that I kind of knew early on from a very young age that I wanted to be a vet. My dad was in the military growing up, so he was in the Navy, and we moved quite a lot. We lived in Puerto Rico when I was 9 years old. And I mean, in Puerto Rico, you have iguanas everywhere and just like lizards and, whatever. And I became fascinated with these, iguanas and stuff. And at that point, I was like, for some reason, I wanted to be a marine biologist for a little bit. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And then my dad kind of threw in the idea of being a veterinarian. And then it just stuck. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to be. So really, I have my dad to thank for that, and also just living in Puerto Rico.
Yeah. And I noticed that you had a year in between graduating college and then vet school, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you actually got to work as a veterinary technician during that year. So
Mhm.
looking back, what stands out to you about that experience before vet school?
Yeah, I actually had 2 gap years. So my first gap year was really because I needed to take some prereqs, but also I was like, I need to make sure that this is what I want to do, like absolutely 100%. And so I worked for a very family-owned small practice in Ambler, Pennsylvania, and I just jumped right in and I was exposed to so much. And it really, Dr. Madden is his name. I have a lot to thank for him and his mentorship. And he just like was like a cheerleader for me. He was like always like, yeah, you're going to be a great vet. You definitely need to go and apply and everything. And so he kind of hyped me up and got me ready and excited about starting a career in vet med.
And just being in the clinic, was there anything kind of working as a technician that further got you more excited about continuing the career as a veterinarian or anything you remember from that time?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was client education was a huge aspect. That was something that I had to learn throughout that year, and it was it was challenging at times, right? I learned a lot about compassion during that year and just having that for clients and things like that, not having any judgment going into an appointment. I definitely learned that because we saw a lot of different clients from different backgrounds in that clinic. So it taught me a lot more about like my communication skills than anything. And then it was funny because each time every year I would come back and I would work at the clinic again, just like during my times off. And it was fun because I was like, wow, like I know so much more. I feel like more intelligent in my head. Like I understand things now, but I was always like just getting a little bit better at my communication each time. And I would also like just watch Dr. Madden and his interactions with people. Everyone loved this man. Everyone. I kind of was like, I want to be like him when I'm a vet. I mean, he was compassionate in himself. So he has a very interesting background. He's from Ireland originally. And so he went to vet school in Ireland, and his wife is also a vet. And he has two children who are also vets. So it's just a family of vets.
Yeah. But I mean, again, that I think that speaks volumes because when his children saw veterinary medicine and what it was like to be a vet, they saw something that they also wanted to be a part of. So,
Mhm.
yeah, we'll have to get him on the podcast
Yeah.
and talk to him. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So you went to St. George's University for
Mhm.
vet school, then you penned for your clinical year. So
Mhm.
what was your veterinary school experience like?
Yeah, it was very unique. Like I mentioned, I mean, my dad was in the Navy, so I'm so used to just moving. We were moving like every year growing up until I got to high school and I was like, I want to stay at one high school. So it taught me a lot about like adaptability and change. And so that's really what I wanted in vet school too. At first, I was very hesitant about going to a school that was on an island, but also being from an island like Puerto Rico, I was like, this will be very familiar too. It was really fun getting to know the island of Grenada, but it also brought some challenges too. My family trying to visit and things like that, just the flight over there. I always had to drive up to JFK to get the flight down to Grenada. Thankfully there wasn't like a time difference or anything and the weather was always gorgeous, so that was awesome. But my experience in general, you had people from all over in my class, so that was super cool. A lot of my classmates we even had international people as well, so that was very unique. I think there was only a handful of us who were students of color. I want to say like 8 to 10 out of our graduating class of 100. In general, I think that, my experience there, I wouldn't go back and do anything different. I really enjoyed my, I guess, 2.5 years there because of COVID. We had to come back home. How cool is it that we then get to spend a year in the States at a school that maybe initially we wanted to go to or whatever it was. And Penn was it for me. So it felt cool coming back home, things being like full circle for me.
Yeah. I'm very curious about the vet students that went through vet school during the COVID times. Kind of explain what that was like. Do you feel like that's going to impact you, good, bad, ugly? Like what are your thoughts about that and that experience?
Yeah, thankfully I didn't have it impacted me, but not tremendously. Like I feel like these later classes
Yeah.
now it's impacting them. So really I had one semester, we were halfway through my sixth semester, so my third year going into my fourth year, and we were already halfway through. So basically I just had Zoom university for what, 2 more months. So it wasn't that bad, and I had
Mhm.
already completed like my surgery rotation prior to, so I already had the surgery experience and things like that, whereas now it's kind of, I feel like classes and schools, it's very limited on maybe what kind of experience you get surgery wise in school, just because of COVID. So then from there, I was transitioning to Penn and I was supposed to start in June in person. But because of COVID, they kind of had us do half Zoom, half in person for the first, like, I want to say 3 months. And it wasn't too much of an issue for me because my first rotation or two weren't something that like a surgery rotation where I needed to be in the clinic. So it was okay to be able to do that online. And then the rest of the year was in person and in the hospital. And it was definitely a very interesting experience because the hospital was only us students and clinicians. And so no clients were in the hospital, just their pets. And a lot of the communication was on the phone, which I was very worried about because I was like, how am I going to be okay when things go back to normal and I have to talk to someone face to face? Because you're on the phone and you can kind of gather your thoughts and you don't have to be like nervous, I feel like, as opposed to talking to someone in person and kind of having rapid fire answers right there. And so that was something that was a little interesting, especially like in my emergency rotation, I would say. I think that I adapted well and adjusted well to that. And it didn't really pose a problem for me going into my first year post grad. So my first year as, a vet, I feel like I was very eager. I was like, I'm ready. I want to get into it. And I've always really been like that. I was ready to just be a vet. I truly didn't have too many issues with speaking with clients like I thought I would. And I didn't lose out on too much of the hands-on experience. So that was also really nice too.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you had a lot of communication practice or, experience before that as well. So I'm sure that helped you and just kind of along with your education. Now,
Yeah.
it sounds like you might actually be one of the few, but I'm curious to know when you were going into vet school, did you change what you thought you might do or what you might be interested in after vet school? Like, what was that kind of
Yeah.
transition?
Um, yeah. So going into vet school, I went in kind of open-minded. I was like, I could be a large animal vet maybe, or I love small animal medicine too. And it's funny because my experience leading up to vet school, I worked at the Philadelphia Zoo very early on in high school because I thought, hey, maybe I want to be a zoo vet. But then I quickly found out that I didn't, even though I really had a great experience, but I was like, I don't think this is for me. And then I also did some exotics work too. So I was very like, hey, whatever it is that I'm very interested in throughout vet school, that's what I'm going to do. I will say that I loved large animal medicine. Like I was very surprised that I really enjoyed it as much as I did. And I was kind of stuck though on small animal anesthesia in general, and then derm as well. That's really what I was like passionate about in school. Like I loved it. And then it came to my fourth year, and I was like, I don't think I can be an anesthesiologist. I was like, it's like a lot more years. And I was like, it's a lot more complicated than I thought, but I still kind of enjoyed it. And then for derm, I was like, well, if I go into GP, a lot of the cases I'm going to see are derm. And so maybe I'll get my fix that way. So I was like, I'm just going to go into small animal GP. And if, I want to do something later, I can. And I actually became very passionate about surgery in my first year. I loved doing surgery. And that was like a huge surprise for me. I was like, whoa, like, so that's something very interesting that like I didn't expect in my first year being a vet.
Yeah, I love how you stayed curious. That is always my recommendation for people is stay curious because you will get to try out lots of different things and you never
Yes.
know what you actually end up absolutely loving. So I'm glad to hear
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
All right. So you graduated in 2021. Yay. Celebrate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And so you've been out working in a couple of different veterinary hospitals so far. And being 1 year out of vet school, this is where I'm going to really start throwing some big open-ended questions for you. So have fun with it. When you're out of vet school, what is going through your mind right now pertaining to veterinary medicine, both now and the future of veterinary medicine?
So if I go back to my thoughts on Dr. Madden and
Yeah.
kind of, working there and things like that. And then in comparison to how like vet medicine has evolved, he's been practicing for so many years and he's a great veterinarian. Slowly you started to see like use of these like newer medications. Like I think maybe like Galliprant was starting to come out and Apoquel and things like that. And so the evolution of, all these newer drugs that are coming out is really cool. Like I just recently used Zorbium, which is the transdermal Buprenex for cats.
Mm.
Um, and it's indicated like for, post-op spays and things like that. And it lasts 4 days. And so like, it's really cool that all these newer things are coming out, and the ability for me to like hop onto a CE and learn about new things is like, I love that. I really love that. So I'm always learning, I feel like. And that's something that I feel is very important for us, so that we don't become complacent in how we are practicing medicine, because that's something that I strongly feel about learning and reading up on things and staying up to date on vet medicine.
What about for you and yourself? Right now, you're again 1 year out. So, what do you kind of foresee for yourself in veterinary medicine? What are you looking forward
Yeah,
to?
yeah. It's very weird that I'm only 1 year out.
Seems
It
like
always
forever and a day.
it sure does, but it never feels old. Like, I'm a huge supporter in the motto of, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, right? So I'm super excited about everything. I feel like I have so many different passions right now that it's hard to really say for sure what I anticipate to do in the future. I think the overarching theme is something in leadership, very passionate about, mentorship in general, in the future, holding some sort of position of like a medical director or something like that. I think a lot of that came from my first year of mentorship, with the medical director I had in my first job. And I was like, I want to be just like her. Having, her as an example, paving the way for me, and she kind of took me under her wing and gives me a lot of feedback on things that I've done so far in my career, whether that's medical or just like communication and things like that. So I definitely right now see myself holding some sort of a medical director position, but I could also see myself, I don't know, doing something like consulting and mentorship or something, and like being a speaker or something like that. I think that's way down the line, but I'm starting to dip my toes in that right now, and seeing where that takes me, just to give myself a little bit of experience in that field.
Yeah. Well, I love talking with you. You have such an excitement for the profession, but I also can't help but think about a lot of people 1 year out. They say, within the first 5 years, the burnout is really high in our profession. What do you think is unique about your experience that keeps you very encouraged and excited about being a veterinarian?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because you do worry about burnout, and I've seen it already with my classmates. Something my mentor was very passionate about was just like mental health and well-being, and just ensuring that the new grads don't experience, like the new grads within our first job in the first company that I was at, don't experience that sort of burnout. And so for me, it was really about like figuring out what was my threshold in my first year. And what I mean by that is like, how many days can I reasonably work in a row where I'm 100% on? And, I feel really good and I'm not mentally drained, or I don't feel like walking around like a zombie, like all my energy is out of my system. And so I found out that for me, it's usually 4 to 5 days in a row that I can reasonably do and that I feel good about. In my first year, I was always like, I want to pick up a shift. I want to work more. I get bored on my days off. I just wanted to do it all. And my mentor was like, hey, we got to slow down. Like, you're doing a lot right now. Let's, scale it back. And so she kind of brought me down to earth, and was explaining that it's really important to have those days off in between. And now I'm very good about my days off. Before I was just anxious in the house, and I was like, I want to go back to work. And now I'm like, no, I need that day off to lay down, to really reset, essentially. And whether that's just one day or 2 days or whatever it is, but that's super important. It's just like very necessary in our field.
Yeah. What do you like to do on your days off that kind of helps you recharge?
Recently, it's been reading. I wasn't a very big reader before, but now I've become a huge reader. I've picked up yoga, which is something that I never thought I would be doing either. I used to run track in college and I hated our yoga days. So having this now as a vet, it's like, I'm like, I need that sort of space to just get everything out and be in a calming environment. I also do a lot of walking with my dogs and running and exercising and things like that. So for me, my days off are reserved for doing things that I like to do, whether that's being lazy, just laying around with the dogs or reading or whatever it is.
I love that. And so recently, you talked about having a lot of different passions right now in veterinary medicine. And I think one of them, as of this summer, you became the director of public relations for the Latinx Veterinary Medical Association. So can you speak to this organization? Like, what are their goals and what has this meant for you?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So the reason why this came about was because in my first job, I saw a lot of Spanish speaking clients, which was kind of shocking for me because I didn't realize how big of a Hispanic population there was in that area that I was in. I'm fluent in Spanish, but I don't know like medical terminology very well in Spanish because I don't really use that in regular conversation. So I kind of had to teach myself those things. And I would call my mom and be like, hey, how do you say this? And she's like, I don't know. So it took some time for me to, look up those medical terminology. And then I saw a post one day and I was scrolling through Instagram about how in 2016, of all the pet owners in the United States, it was something like 62% of those owners were Hispanic. And then there's only about 5% of vets in the United States that are actually Hispanic too. And I was like, I knew this was a thing where, Hispanic vets were lacking in our field, but I didn't realize it was like that. And so that like shocked me. And I really was like, what can I do to like bring awareness to this? Or how can I really help in this area of diversity, really, as being a minority in this aspect? And so I saw that LVMA was a thing. And St. George's didn't have a student chapter at the time. So that's a reason why I didn't, really know about it, I guess, in school. The whole reason why this medical association was created was essentially, the lack of Latinx representation in the vet profession and kind of having that absence of a role model or someone that looks like us while we were going through vet school or just our journey in general in this field. And so it kind of brings us all together. And it's like always very empowering for me to sit in a meeting and be like, wow, there's a lot of us. Like, this is so cool. Like, a lot of it is also that we observe how language and cultural barriers have impacted client education. And I definitely realized that in my first year. And so our goals are really to increase the visibility of how we want to grow as being Latinx and being in this field that lacks so much representation. We want to be able to say, hey, if you're a Latinx student in vet med or you want to be a veterinarian, we are here for you and we want to be role models and we want to help you in whatever way that we can. And we just want to encourage that and embrace and promote that there are, Latinx veterinarians. And sort of my job as the public relations director is really to kind of be the voice of the medical association. So whether that's through releasing press releases, facilitating like conference presence, so VMX and AVMA and things like that. And the coolest thing is definitely collaborating with the other affinity groups in our profession, which there are so many that I just did not know about. And so that's also like, it's just so cool to see that there is a lot of diversity in our field and it's growing. It's very encouraging. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just coming back from the Veterinary Innovation Summit, they gave a lot of statistics around the ethnicities of pet owners. I've heard multiple times how wonderful it is to walk into a doctor's office, whether it's veterinary or other medical doctor, and see someone that you identify with, that you feel comfortable with, that gets you in all your situation. I also have a very good friend who is from Puerto Rico. She's an internal medicine specialist.
Nice.
And she has also said that she didn't have a mentor or anyone to look up to that looked like her or Puerto Rican in her field. And she still doesn't, is what she says. And so I like that we are trying to change that. We're coming together, and the word that keeps coming to my mind is unity.
Yeah.
Not only like the Latinx, but as you said, it's fun seeing other groups as well, other diversity groups that are coming together. And in a way, it is creating more unity within the profession. So I love that.
Yeah. And, it's definitely evolving too. I mean, now we have DEI type leaders within the AVMA. I know we recently
Hmm.
hired someone for that, and then also within schools too, which is so cool and so important to have allyship and just familiar faces in your community.
And this can be as broad as you want to make it. But again, being 1 year out, you're a little bit closer to vet school than I am. I'm not going to say when I graduated, although if you look back in episodes, you can find out. Um, what would you recommend to students right now going through vet school? What would be one of the biggest recommendations you have for them?
Oh my gosh, have fun. I was so focused on studying all the time. I had classmates who would always be like, let's go to the beach. And I'm like, no, we have that test on Monday. It'd be like Friday. And I missed out on quite a lot. And it was really because I felt like I had to study so much. And I think a lot of that had to do with just having imposter syndrome. I struggled with that so much my 4 years at St. George's, and especially my first year. And so that really just like drained me all the time. I mean,
Mm.
my husband will tell you now that there were so many times he would get a FaceTime call from me and he's like, I know Genesis is calling me. She's about to start crying about something. She has a test soon. So I I would encourage to have as much fun as you can. Participate in how many ever events that you can and join clubs and just get to know your class and not stick with like just the same group all the time. And then also just like maybe not stay so focused on one area of vet med and just expand and learn about different things and just be very open-minded, I would say.
I definitely relate to I just studied all the time. And that is also a big piece of advice I give people. And you said that you think it could be imposter syndrome. And I want to kind of dig into that just a little bit. So go with me here.
Yeah.
And you may not know the answer to this question, but why do you think you had imposter syndrome your first year?
Yeah. Well, I know.
Okay, good.
So, well, I think I know. Maybe I'll have a revelation later on in my career too. But since I took 2 gap years and, my first year, I got waitlisted at 2 schools in the US and then denied from 3. And I got into St. George's. And I was like, let me just do another year and let me see what happens. Like, I'm young. Let me just see if I can get in somewhere. So my second year, it was kind of the same situation. And I was like, okay, I got accepted again to St. George's. Like, I think this is a sign, like, I should just go. So I went and I had been out of school 2 years and I completely forgot how to study. I couldn't figure it out. I was struggling, like keeping up in class, and I just was overwhelmed all the time. I was like, I just don't know if I can do this. And so I got into my head and I was like, I shouldn't be here. Like, there's just no way. I don't know why I thought that I could go to vet school. I was kind of refusing to like go see like, we had like a counsel, not a counselor, but someone who could help you with study habits and things like that. I was like, I don't need that. I just need to like apply myself and figure it out on my own. And it just spiraled down all the way to my first semester when it came to finals. I don't remember how many tests I failed, but I was on the border of having to repeat that semester. And I remember feeling like, I'm starting to get emotional right now, but I remember feeling like I was like, I just wasn't going to be cut out for this. And I would talk to my husband about it and I'd be like, you really don't understand. Like, you don't understand how many hours I spend studying. And like, it does not matter how long I spend studying. I still go into that test thinking that I'm going to fail this. And so he would listen to me, and he contacted Dr. Madden, and he was like, hey, can you please give Genesis a call? Like, she needs to hear it from you that she's going to make it and she's going to be okay. And so sure enough, it was like the night before my last final, and I get a call from Dr. Madden, and he just like casually checks in on me. He's like, hey, how are things going? I'm like, it's okay. We're in finals, and, I'm struggling a little bit, but I'll be okay. And he kind of just gave me this pep talk, and he told me everything that I needed to hear in that moment. And he was like, you need to realize that, like, you don't need to ace all these exams. You don't need to lose yourself over this. He's like, you're smart enough. Like, you can do it. And I know it's really hard right now, but just imagine, how rewarding it's going to be in the end. And I constantly think back to my first year and where I was at, and just my progression year by year. And although by my fourth year, I still had imposter syndrome, it was like significantly less than my first year, because I realized that, like, yeah, I am smart enough and I can apply myself, and I don't need to kill myself studying over these things, because some of this is, I know it. And so it was just like telling myself those things. Occasionally I will slip back into imposter syndrome, but that's mainly because you'll have these complicated cases, multiple comorbidities, things like that. And it just gets jumbled in my head. And then, the pet might not be getting better. And you just try everything you can. I've realized that sometimes you just, despite what you do, no matter how much effort you put into and whatever treatment and whatever last resort you're at, sometimes that's good enough. Like, that's all you can do. And I guess just speaking off of that, I had one case in my first year, and within my first like 3 months, where it was a similar case, and where we had all these things, and I just and I was trying everything I could. And we got to a point of euthanasia, and I was devastated. Like, I think it was my first euthanasia, actually. I felt like a failure at that point. I called my mentor at that time, and I was just like crying. I was sobbing. And she was like, Genesis, like, you need to realize that sometimes it's a success when you like have a euthanasia. Like, you're putting that pet out of its pain. And she was like, you need to view it in a good light sometimes. And so that really stuck out to me, and that kind of something that I keep in the back of my head.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can definitely tell
I
that
threw a lot at you.
You did. No, I love it.
I didn't expect that.
No, that's awesome. One of the interesting things about vet school as well is where most of us are in our 20s, and that is such a big moment in our lives. And I think we have imposter syndrome at all ages, except maybe like the really little ones, when we just want Cheerios.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm so glad that you can look back and see your growth and be proud of yourself and acknowledge, even though you still have moments where, you have to kind of talk to yourself or find your support system, that you've really grown. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's huge. And yeah, I wouldn't be where I am today without those people who were my cheerleaders all throughout, vet school, and even prior to. My dad and my mom, for sure, were people who always believed in you. And yeah, your parents should always believe in you, but like my mom and my dad were like, yes, you're gonna go places. Like, and my dad was very hard on me as a child growing up. And I always used to be like, why are you so hard on me? But you're not as hard on Daniel, who's my younger brother. And I'm convinced it's because I mentioned that I wanted to be a vet early on. And he was like, we're gonna get you there. So I look back and I'm like, thanks, Dad. Thanks for, kind of giving me that pressure, because I realize that I kind of do need that pressure, like that slight, that little voice in the back of your head that's like, hey, here's the expectation, and I know you can meet it. And sometimes that can be a bad thing, but sometimes it's a really good thing too, because it kind of motivates me to get to that level.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, before we go into our rapid fire questions, is there anything else words of wisdom for the profession?
Oh man, I mean, no, I have that unique experience where I am, like you say, like a year out. I don't even think it's been a year and a half. I think it's just been like a year and a few months. And, I have in my second job now. My first job, just, towards the end, I was having some ambiguity and where things were going. And so I was just looking, and the current company I'm with, I was super intrigued with, just because of sort of this development of new medicine and the emphasis on education for our pet parents and things like that. And right now it's so cool to be able to be a part of a company that we have in-person visits, but also we use telehealth. And we also do like mobile unit and vaccine clinics and stuff.
Yeah.
And I love all three of those things. So I love that I get to be a part of that. And I hope that that's where VetMed is going, where we can use various different types of platforms to really gear towards our, this new generation of technology. And I'm really enjoying like this telemedicine type thing that we're doing now.
Yeah, good for you. I love how you can do lots of little different things. It keeps you motivated, excited, learning. Love that.
Oh yeah, that's what I need. Variability. I love like keep it, I gotta be on my toes. I'm like ready for whatever. It's why my work schedule, I don't have a very consistent one. I'm always like, just throw me on the schedule whenever. Like I want to, be excited about when I come. Yeah, surprise me.
Love that. Love that. All right. Well, our final 4 questions for you. The first one is, what is something on your bucket list?
Oh man, I want to run a full marathon before I turn 30. I've done the Gasparilla, which is in Florida, and that was a half marathon.
What is a moment of simple joy for you?
Oh my goodness. This is going to sound crazy, but the first thing that came to my mind is feeding time with my dogs. Like my dogs are so happy when they get fed. And like I love bringing them joy. Like I get excited about like putting food into their bowls and stuff, and they're so like happy and they think that I'm the best person in the world. That's just like a very simple joy for me. Getting, feeding them in the morning and at night.
As a nutritionist, you just made my day. So
That's so funny. I forgot.
yes, that is now my banner. No. Oh, okay. Question number 3 is, if you could create a law that everyone had to follow, what would your law be?
Okay, so I think it would be like free universal healthcare, like on a very like, simple level. I think that that's something that just sticks out like as number one. I wish that that was the case already.
Yeah, you're actually not the first person to say that, Law. So we'll get you guys together.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's make it happen.
I'm totally on board. All right. Your last one is, what is something you are most grateful for?
Hmm. I'm definitely very grateful for my education and how it's kind of paved the way for, how I'm living right now and my profession and everything. And although graduate school is so difficult and very expensive, I am very thankful and grateful that I had the means to go to grad school and be able to fulfill, my dream of becoming a vet.
This has been the Vet Life Reimagined podcast. Whether you are listening or watching on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please make sure you are subscribed to catch all these amazing people in our profession. Also, send this episode to someone you think who would appreciate it. Have a recommendation for someone who would be a good guest? Please reach out on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. There aren't that many Dr. Sprinkles. Until next time, Vet Lifers.